Before adding the footer section to our web page, let me go back to what we did to this image right here. We implemented this as a background using CSS. And the reason I did that is because I considered this to be a non-essential part of the overall design for this page. It's just for decoration. It's not really important for a screen reader, for example, to tell the person that's trying to look at my web page or visit it. It's not necessary for them to know that right next to the biographical section is a picture of twins sleeping. So let's say something about that. Let's add a comment to this div. We're in the HTML portion, so make sure you use the correct syntax for that. We'll say the image is implemented as a background. Best practice is to keep non-essential images out of the document structure. CSS can be disabled, so make sure that it truly is non-essential. If CSS is disabled, then it will not display this image, and since it's part of the CSS, there's not going to be an alt attribute that will display some kind of text to explain what that text is. That's why you want to make sure that if you're going to use CSS to implement an image, that it's non-essential. Background images have no effect on the height or width of an element. That's why we had to do a hack with the display flex declaration. We had to get this div to capture its height from this div next to it, because this, with just the background image in it, doesn't have a height or width, or it does have a height because of this column 5 class, but otherwise by itself, background images do not affect the height and width of elements. Okay, one more thing. This div is getting its width from column 5, which I just mentioned, and its height from the flex property in its parent container. Let's move on to the footer section. We'll add the opening and closing footer tags. And the footer is a lot simpler than the other parts of this web page. We just have content that's centered within the footer. This one we will implement as an unordered list, and we've already set up the code for that inside this nav section. I'll just copy that, the unordered list, and paste that into my footer. I'll also fix my white space here. I need to do that. There we go. We'll get this figured out. There's the unordered list. And for the paragraph after that, we'll add the copyright line. For the copyright, instead of the copyright symbol, we'll use the character entity, &, copy, semicolon, the year, 2017, brackets photography, vertical bar, and for that we will use the character entity, ensign VERT semicolon, Warrensburg, Missouri. Save that, refresh, and now we have the two elements there. Now you can't see the unordered list right now because of the text being white. And the reason for that is because we just use this for this section here. So we're going to have to make some adjustments here. We'll have to create a separate rule for anchor tags within the footer section versus the header section. We also need to make this centered. Let me double check the font size. 16, so we'll just leave it because that's the default size. The copyright line is also 16, so we'll leave that alone. All right, let's see if we can start fixing this. Let's start by making everything centered within the footer. That seems to be the easiest. Let's add a footer selector. We'll say text dash align center. Save that and refresh. Now everything's centered. Let's do something about those links because we can't see them right now. It needs to be that particular color. We'll target anchor tags inside a footer. And we'll say the color should be 6B605C. See what that does. Save that and refresh. And there's home right there. Now we got to do something about the other text right there. Now, if you really want to try to figure out where it's getting its colors from, you could use your inspect element. And you'll see that for LIs, we set a rule where one of the declarations is to make it white. Well, this is an LI, so it's making itself white. We'll have to do something about that too. So we'll say footer LI color 6B605C. Save, refresh. All right, there we go. Now we just need to work on adding some spaces here so it looks a little better. We'll add a padding to the top of footer so that we can move this navigation section away from that border. And we'll just say that that is, we'll just round it up to 25 pixels. Adding top 25px. All right. Then we'll add a padding to the bottom so that we have the copyright line not so close to the bottom edge. We'll just say padding bottom 25px. Save and refresh. And then we'll add a space, a margin between the unordered list here and this paragraph. We'll say footer UL. We're targeting this unordered list that's inside a footer, and we're going to say margin bottom 25px and save. Now we have completed the home page for this Ragus photography page. We took a mockup and implemented the HTML and CSS version of that. It took having to go left to right, top to bottom to accomplish that, and also knowing about how the different properties work so that we can come up with something like this. Now, before I let you go to complete the rest of Lab 3 on your own, I want to point out two more things. Number one, the width. We made the body 1200 pixels wide. Now, if you were paying attention to one of the PDFs where I mentioned that when it comes to fixed width pages, you should stick with 1000 pixels or less. Well, that information is like a couple of years old, a few years old. And it's 2017, and a lot of people probably, or more people, have monitors that are bigger than 1000 pixels at this point. So 1200 pixels, I would say, is pretty safe for many people. For example, my Mac here is 5120 pixels, and my other Mac here next to me, you can't see it. It has a resolution of 2880. So it's fairly common these days to have a resolution that's greater than 1000 pixels. So I would say 1200 pixels, you'll be okay. The second part that I want to mention is if you compare this mockup, this Photoshop file, with this, it's close, but it's not going to be 100% perfect. For example, take a look at this image right here. We could tweak this a little more so that it's more centered, so this baby doesn't get cut off here. If you look at the mockup here, theoretically, this is what the customer or client signed off on, and then this is what you deliver. Well, the client is just going to have to understand that it's a different process creating something in Photoshop versus creating the HTML CSS version of that. It's impossible to make them look the same. I could get really close, and that's the best we can do. All right, so I'm trying to think here. I don't think I'm forgetting anything, but if I do, I will just put that information in your Lab 3 submission instructions. So this concludes Lab 3. Your next step then is to review Lab 3 submission instructions to make sure that you've met all the specs for this activity.